Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. Commander Linda here with another video on DC Legends. And today I'm finally bringing you the spotlight for Siren, Assassin of the Deep Sea. Took me a while to get around to this one, but it's finally here. So let's go ahead and take a look at her character design. This is her legendary skin. A lot of armor, looking very good. So in case you don't have her at legendary levels, you can see what she looks like, and hopefully you were able to take advantage of her live event and at least take her to legendary 1 and 2. That I would say that definitely legendary 2 and 3, that's when she begins to shine. But let's go ahead and talk about the basics. First of all, her affinity, she's a mystical character, and looking at her her bio briefly, she's a fierce warrior. Siren uses her cunning and mystical powers to battle her twin sister Mara and her husband Aquaman. So I didn't know they were sisters until they actually came out in the game. Affiliations, she's an Atlantean. Powers, deadly assassin. She wields mystical constructs of hard water that cut and maim her enemies. So let's take a look at her stats. And first of all, her highest stat is actually, oddly enough, is stamina. And of course, I'm just looking at basic stats without their gears. And it's 1,193. And she is able to take a hit, guys. She is tanky for mystical characters, I guess you could say, but she can withstand most attacks from physical characters, the first attack when she's at full health. So you can see her hit points on that stamina is 11,931, so pretty high. She's level 64 right now for me. Her second highest stat is strength at 1,133. She is number 15 when it comes to strength in the game, so that's very good for her, and she's a damage dealer obviously, so it would make sense that that would be her second highest stat. Her speed is 82 base speed, so she's 15 when it comes to strength, and she does typically tend to go third when it comes to some compositions in the game. Sometimes she can go second depending on who you have on the team. She is faster than Arcus, I'll tell you that much right now, but she is definitely not faster obviously than Huntress and other characters that tend to be faster than she is. Now, she's a fairly straightforward hero when it comes to building her, that there are certain variants that I will talk about later in the video. So let's go ahead and start talking about her moves. So first of all, we have Vicious Constructs, and this ability does damage to one enemy and applies 4 bleeds if the target is already bleeding. Oddly enough, her first ability is not her setup move, which is kind of odd because we all know that basically the first move typically tends to be the one that is the setup move. That being said, this ability does a good amount of damage and applies bleed to an already bleeding target, which makes sense, or actually not that it doesn't make sense, I'm sorry, but it actually helps out her second ability, and it benefits even more from bleeds when it's upgraded to legendary. Now at legendary, the upgrade is 40% chance to use Dagger Deluge on target if the target is already bleeding, which is her second ability, and this actually procs fairly frequently for me, as I have seen. So it's a very, very good upgrade. Now her second ability, which we just referred to on her upgrade, legendary upgrade, is Dagger Deluge. And this ability does damage to an enemy, and it applies 4 bleeds to that target. That is the normal setup when it's not upgraded. Now this is her setup move, which is odd because this ability is on a cooldown, and it's her second ability. But since it applies bleeds to one target, now it has a decent amount of damage output, which only makes it better, or a bit better I should say, with its legendary upgrade. Now this ability actually has 2 legs when it comes to legendary upgrades. The first one is 2% true damage per bleed on target. So for each target, each bleed that they have, it's just going to do 2% damage, true damage on top of that. That means that true damage is an ability that is not affected by strength down or strength up for that matter. So it's very neat because even if she's affected by strength down, she will still do a fairly good amount of damage. Now the second leg is enrage that target, which is it's kind of meh in reality. I mean, enrage is really a mechanic in this game that doesn't do much really, so I'm not talking about builds just yet, but I would definitely say save this one for last, unless of course you like the enrage mechanic, that is. Alright, so moving on to her third ability, we've got Devil Fury. Now this is her AoE attack, and this ability does light damage to an enemy, 5 increased damage per bleed on the enemy team, up to 100. Now this ability may have the light damage tag, but I've seen it do respectable amounts of damage, especially on targets that already have bleeds. And I said single target at first, and I gotta correct myself. This is once again her AoE attack. So this is a very nice AoE attack that just gets even better at legendary levels. Now, the legendary upgrade for this ability, it applies 1 to 2 bleeds on the enemy team. Usually, typically, I've seen this do 2 stacks of bleeds almost every time. So it's very consistent that you will get bleeds on a team with her. This will allow him to use Fallout possibly in the first turn. This is a very good ability. I like it a lot. Moving on to her passive ability, Shifter. And this ability grants her evasion up when an enemy takes bleed damage and 45% chance at max level for an extra evasion up. Now this is a very nice passive and helps her survive otherwise nasty situations, and I've seen her be the last one standing and being able to win. Now survival is the name of the game, as you know, and she's dangerous when she is cornered for sure. Now let me explain the bleed damage. So not only does this give her an evasion up when you apply bleed to that enemy, but whenever it's their turn and they take bleed damage from those stacks of bleeds, it'll give her an evasion up. So she can potentially gain a lot of evasions up in one turn. Now the legendary upgrade for this ability gives her a 50% chance for evasion up to last 1 extra turn. So this is very good. This lets her pile up evasion stacks while the enemies bleed to death, and that does happen very, very often when the enemies are trying to hit her and they can't, and they just die off of bleeds. Alright, so I'm going to talk about builds, and this is kind of like a new thing that I'm adding to the video, but I just wanted to give you guys some suggestions depending on where you have her at. Obviously, if you have her at legendary rank 4, you would literally just go in order 1, 2, 3, 4. So you would start with her first ability, second ability, third ability, and fourth ability. And like I said, the last leg of that legendary ability for the second ability, you would leave that for that last. Now, legendary 3 builds. Okay, I'm going to give you 3, guys. First of all, we're going to start with an aggressive build, which is the one that I start with, but I knew I was going to be able to take her to legendary 4, so I wasn't worried about Shifter. So first of all, we have one, that would be first ability, second ability, and third ability. That's just for a completely aggressive build that's going to take advantage of bleeds. If you want to go more the defensive route, which is if you have her at legendary 3 and you're not able to get her to legendary 4, I would probably recommend this one on top of the aggressive or over the aggressive. And I would say go with her third ability first, then go with Shifter, her passive, and then finally upgrade her first ability, which is going to give you that 40% chance to use that second ability. This is what I call a hybrid build. But really, well, yeah, it's kind of a hybrid build for bleed teams. And defensive capabilities, kind of like puts her right there in the middle. So you would upgrade her first ability, her third ability, and her fourth ability. That's for legendary 3. Now, if you only have her at legendary 2, I would recommend the following. You can either do an aggressive build, which again goes 1, 2. So you would do her first ability and her second ability. And a defensive build, which obviously you would do the latter 2 abilities, so 3 and 4, her AoE and passive ability. Okay, and then a defensive build for a bleed team. What I would do is I would go for 3 and 4. I'm sorry, I skipped 1. I apologize. And that is the aggressive build for bleed team. I would do 1 and 3. So you do the AoE to apply those stacks of bleed, and then for her first ability to give her that 40% chance to use her second ability, which is very good. Alright, so and then the defensive build for bleed team would be similar to the defensive build, which is 3 and 4. Now, if you have her at legendary 1, I would say depending on what you're going for, you can do 3 or 1 for aggressive compositions, or you can do 4 for survivability, which is probably what I would recommend if you have her in a bleed team, that is. If not, just go for her 3 or her 1 if you want to have a more aggressive build. Alright, so let's talk about some of the pros for her. Pros, she has high damage output in bleed teams. She has great survivability thanks to her passive and healthy hit points too. She has AoE bleeds, which is awesome, and she can follow up on her own attacks, which is very, very good. So it's kind of like she has her own built-in assists. Now, the cons, or the things that are not so good about her, she's highly dependent on bleeds. So when she's not on a bleed team, it's not that she is useless, because she is not useless by any means. She has fairly good damage output. But she definitely shines on bleed teams. Being a mystical character in a highly defensive and a highly physical meta, even though that has changed slightly with the affinity updates, and even with that, she still survives a lot of physical attacks. Now the slow setup outside of a bleed team really hinders her, and the average speed can make her green arrows victims sometimes. So those are some of the things that are contrary to her. Now, very briefly, some of the teams that I would recommend. Right now, I'm using her with Arcus, and I'm using her with Cheetah, and also with Huntress. And I have some variations of that team where I kind of take out Huntress and put in Cyborg, depending on who I'm facing. So, just some team recommendations for her. And also, you can check out Tempest and Guinan, which is a Team Synergy episode that I did where I used Cheetah, Camo, Green Arrow, Castaway, and I use Siren. It's a very, very good team. It's kind of a difficult team to use, I'll be honest with you, but it's a lot of fun. So there you go, guys. That's Siren for you. What do you think of Siren? And let me know in the comment section below. And which legendary rank were you able to take her to? Which legendary upgrades did you choose and why? And which teams have you come up with her? And how is it working out for you? Let me know in the comment section below. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on all the great content that I'll be bringing you in the days ahead. And if you would like to support the creation of more videos, click on the link to my PayPal tips jar in the video description below. And also check out some of the other videos that I have posted on the channel. And as always, guys, have a fantastic rest of your day and stay legendary.